The rain hammered the roof of our old Victorian in suburban Boston like God's own judgment, drowning out the hum of the Red Sox game on the TV. Christopher stood in the kitchen doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder, soaked through from the walk home from his senior year at Boston Latin, and said it plain as the thunder cracking outside, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay." The words landed like a sucker punch, my coffee mug shattering on the hardwood floor, shards scattering like the fragile pieces of the family portrait we'd hung above the mantel, and our miracle boy, all smiles at his 8th grade graduation. I froze, the remote slipping from my grip, while Ellen's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes, those kind, hazel eyes that had scanned adoption profiles for years until they landed on a scrawny 5-year-old with a mop of chestnut hair and a grin that could melt glaciers, widening in shock. Christopher didn't flinch. But 18. He was all sharp angles and quiet fire. 6 feet of lean muscle from track team sprints and late-night shifts at the corner bookstore. His face pale but set, like he'd rehearsed this in the mirror 1,000 times. "I've known since I was 12, he added, voice steady but cracking at the edges. "And I can't keep lying to you." To myself, that night, the house that had always felt like a safe harbor turned into a storm-tossed ship. Ellen and I lay awake in our king-sized bed, the ceiling fan whirring like accusations. We'd adopted him from a foster system nightmare in Philly, crack-addicted bio mom, absent dad, bounced between homes until we scooped him up at 5, promising him the white picket fence life in Cambridge. Soccer games in the fall, lobster rolls on Cape Cod summers, Christmas lights strung across the porch where we teach him to string them just right. He'd been our redemption. The kid who made us parents after 3 miscarriages and a string of failed IVFs that drained our savings and our souls. And now this, gay, in our tidy, progressive but private New England world, where rainbows were for pride parades downtown but not for the boy we'd raised to blend in, to succeed, to carry our name forward. By morning, the coffee was cold, and so was the air between us. Ever the mediator with her social worker's heart, pulled him into a hug at the breakfast table, whispering, "We love you, honey." Always, but her voice trembled, and I saw the flicker, the unspoken fear that this would unravel him. Everything. I clapped him on the shoulder, muttered something about proud of your honesty, but inside, my gut twisted like a rusted pipe. What about college apps to Harvard? The legacy we dreamed for him? What about the grandkids we joked about? Ellen's garden parties with little ones chasing fireflies? Gay meant different. It meant danger in a country where kids like him still got beaten in locker rooms or worse, where the news cycled stories of bashings and suicides. I wanted to shield him, but all I could picture was him alone, adrift in a world that chewed up dreamers. Christopher didn't push it. He aced his finals, packed for freshman orientation at Tufts with that same quiet resolve, kissing us goodbye on the cracked driveway asphalt, his beat-up Honda Civic loaded with dorm crap and dreams. "I'll call," he promised. And he did, every Sunday. Voice brighter over the line. Tales of bio lectures and keggers that sounded too straight-laced for a college party. But there was a new lilt to his laugh, a freedom in the pauses, like he'd exhaled a breath held for years. Ellen softened first, clipping articles on queer icons, Elliot Page, Lil Nas X, leaving them on the kitchen counter like breadcrumbs. I nodded along, but the knot in my chest tightened. Was this the shatter we'd feared? Or just the first crack? Fall leaves turned to snow by Thanksgiving, And he brought home a surprise, Alex. They met in a freshman seminar on American Lit, Thoreau and Whitman. Irony not lost on Christopher when he texted me about it. Alex was everything our boy wasn't, broad-shouldered from crew team rows on the Mystic River. Golden curls that caught the light like wheat fields in some Norman Rockwell painting. A grin that screamed easy confidence. Californian transplant. Poli-sci major with dreams of law school and changing the world. One protest at a time. They showed up at our door on a blustery Wednesday. Hands brushing as they stamped snow from their boots. And I swear the air hummed with it, that electric pull. The kind Ellen and I hadn't felt since our honeymoon in the Berkshires. Mr. and Mrs. Hail, Alex said, extending a hand that swallowed mine. His blue eyes crinkling with warmth. Chris has told me so much. Thank you for raising this incredible guy. Christopher flushed. That rare pink blooming on his cheeks. And Ellen melted like butter on cornbread, ushering them into the living room with mulled cider and her famous pumpkin pie. Dinner was a revelation, laughter echoing off the wainscoting. Alex quoting Baldwin on love's radical edges while Christopher leaned into him, their knees knocking under the oak table. For the first time since the rain-soaked confession, I saw my son whole, eyes sparkling, gestures animated, like the weight of secrecy had lifted and left him soaring. We fell into it, that new normal. Alex became a fixture, weekend barbecues in our backyard, where he'd man the grill with a spatula like a conductor's baton, flipping burgers while debating Supreme Court rulings with me over IPAs. Christopher bloomed under it, top of his class, volunteering at the campus LGBTQ center, even pitching in on Ellen's book club reads about queer history. They were careful at first, stolen glances over pie crusts, but by spring break, it was hand-holding on the couch during movie nights, quiet kisses when they thought we weren't looking. Ellen and I exchanged looks, proud, relieved, a little awed. This was the after we'd hoped for, love. Real and unapologetic, stitching the cracks. But love in America isn't a straight line, it's a back road with potholes and detours, lined with billboards preaching salvation or damnation depending on the county. It started small, a snide comment from my brother at Easter brunch in Worcester, his Bible-thumping wife eyeing Alex like he was the devil's appetizer. Pray for him, Tom, she whispered loud enough for the deviled eggs to hear. Christopher overheard, jaw tightening, but Alex just squeezed his hand under the table, whispering something that made him chuckle through the hurt. We brushed it off as family static, but the static built. Thus, protests flared over trans rights, and Christopher came home shaken, recounting a rally where counter-protesters screamed slurs that echoed the foster home ghosts he'd buried. It's not just words, Dad, he said one night, nursing a beer on the porch swing, stars pricking the velvet sky. It follows you. Like it's waiting to prove you're wrong for existing. Alex was his anchor. Unyielding. They road tripped to Provincetown that summer, P-Town's rainbow flags whipping in the Atlantic wind, sending us selfies from drag brunches and dune hikes, faces sun-kissed and tangled in each other's arms. This is it, Christopher texted. Feels like home. Back in Boston. They shacked up in a cramped Somerville apartment off Davis Square, peeling wallpaper, a fire escape view of the T rumbling by, chipping in rent from part-time gigs. Alex waitered at a queer-friendly bistro in the South End. Christopher tutored high schoolers in lit. Evenings were theirs, cooking pasta al dente, debating Foucault till dawn, Bodies entwined on a thrift store futon under posters of Oscar Wilde and moonlit skylights. I watched it unfold like a father should, proud. From a distance. Ellen and I hosted family dinners every other Sunday. The table groaning under roast chicken and Ellen's apple crisp. Alex fitting like he'd been born to it. He called me Tom, with that easy Cali drawl. But there was respect in it. A nod to the man who'd given his boyfriend roots. After too much Cabernet, he pulled me aside in the den, surrounded by my dusty law books from the firm days. "Chris is lucky," he said, voice low and earnest. "Not every kid gets parents who show up like you two. I see how he lights up talking about you." I clapped his back. Throat tight, murmuring, "You're good for him, son. And damn if it didn't feel true." But expectations are brittle things, forged in the quiet hours when you convince yourself the story ends happy. By junior year, the cracks spiderweb deeper. Alex's law school apps loomed, Stanford, Berkeley, whispers of clerkships in D.C. Christopher, ever the planner, talked masters in education, staying east to build a life in Boston's brick and cobble embrace. "We're solid," he'd say. But his eyes darted when Alex mentioned the future, like he was reading tea leaves in the steam. Then came the internship. Alex snagged one at a big firm in Manhattan. Unpaid glory that meant subletting their place and crashing on couches for the summer. "It's temporary," he promised over FaceTime, his face pixelated but smiling. "Builds the resume." "For us," Christopher nodded, but the apartment felt hollow that fall. He crashed at ours more, helping Ellen with yard work, raking leaves into piles that smelled of earth and change. One night, over leftover lasagna, he cried, "What if he doesn't come back? That? What if this is it, the peak, and it all slopes down?" His voice was small, the boy's voice from foster files, not the man's we'd raised. I pulled him into a hug, awkward in my armchair, smelling his shampoo, citrus and salt. "Love doesn't slope. It bends. You'll bend with it." But even as I said it, doubt not. America sells forever like it's apple pie. But queer love? It's a gamble on a rigged table. The shatter came swift as a nor'easter, winds howling off the harbor on a December eve. Christopher called from the Mass General. Fluorescent hell, voice hollowed out. "Alex. Accident. Hit and run on Starro Drive." My heart seized, keys fumbling as Ellen and I tore across the Zachem Bridge, rain sheeting the windshield like tears. They wheeled him in, Alex, our golden boy, tubes snaking from arms, monitors beeping a frantic Morse. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a drunk driver who'd fled into the night. Christopher sat vigil in the hallway, knees drawn up, face a mask of grief, whispering, he was coming home to me. From some firm holiday thing. Said he'd make eggs Benedict at dawn. We stayed through the blur, nurses' sympathetic nods, surgeons' clipped updates, the sterile coffee that tasted like regret. Ellen held Christopher's hand, murmuring prayers to saints she'd half forgotten. I paced, bargaining with a god who'd taken too much already. Alex fought for 36 hours, vitals spiking then flatlining, his curls matted with sweat, that grin reduced to a slack line. When the code blue wailed its end, Christopher shattered, sobs racking his frame like the sobs of that 5-year-old photo, the one where he'd clutched a stuffed bear like a lifeline. "Why him?" he gasped, collapsing against me. Why not me? The funeral was a gray January affair at a Somerville chapel. Rainbow stole draped over the casket like a defiant flag. Friends from Tufts packed the pews, queer kids with piercings and tattoos. Allies in button-downs, sharing stories of Alex's fire, organizing die-ins for AIDS awareness. Quoting Audre Lorde in bar fights against bigots. Christopher spoke last, voice raw over the podium, eulogizing the man who'd taught him love wasn't a secret to hoard. He saw me, he said, eyes scanning the stained glass like it held answers. All of me. And he stayed. Ellen wept silently, clutching my hand, while I stared at the floor. Guilt gnawing, had our expectations boxed them in? Pushed Alex toward that glittering internship? That deadly drive? Grief hollowed Christopher out that spring, classes dropped, shifts missed. Nights curled on our couch with takeout containers and Netflix glow. He pushed us away at first, anger flaring like summer storms. You don't get it. You think love's linear, Kudge? But it's messy. It's loss. I bite my tongue, remembering my own ghosts, the miscarriages that left Ellen barren, the adoption fees that mortgaged our dreams. But Ellen, wise Ellen, drew him out with walks along the Charles, autumn leaves crunching underfoot, talking not solutions but stories. Her uncle, closeted in the 50s, who jumped from the Golden Gate, a client from her agency, a trans teen who'd found family in a chosen coven. Pain doesn't erase the good, she said one dusk. Gulls wheeling overhead. It honors it. Slowly, the bend happened. By summer, Christopher resurfaced, volunteering at the center full-time, co-facilitating groups for queer youth, his voice steady as he shared Alex's light. He dated tentatively, a barista with ink-sleeved arms, a poet from open mics, but nothing stuck. And that was okay. We saw it, the way he laughed fuller, shoulders squared against the wind. One July 4th, fireworks blooming over the esplanade. He turned to us amid the crowd, Ellen's picnic blanket spread with subs and sparklers. I thought coming out would end us, he said, voice cutting through the booms. But it started something real. You showed up. Every time. I pulled him close, Ellen sandwiching us in, the three of us a knot against the chaos. Expectations shattered? How you sus? The tidy narrative we'd scripted. But in the rubble, we'd built something truer, a family not of blood or blueprints, but of showing up, bending, loving through the breaks. Christopher, our adopted heart, wasn't shattered. He was reforged, stronger, but shining. And in America's endless reinvention, that was the real miracle. The July sun dipped low over the Mystic, painting the crew boats in hues of tangerine and indigo as Christopher laced up his running shoes on the boathouse dock. It had been 6 months since Alex's funeral. 6 months of what felt like wading through molasses, every step a reminder of the void. But today, with the river lapping lazy at the pilings and a playlist of Hosier crooning through his earbuds, he felt the stirrings of motion, a pull toward something beyond survival. 1 foot, he muttered, echoing his therapist's mantra, and bolted, pavement blurring under Nike's worn thin from endless loops. Back in Somerville, the apartment waited like a half-written novel, Alex's law texts stacked on the windowsill, a half-empty bottle of his cologne gathering dust on the dresser. Christopher had kept it all, a museum to what was, Until Ellen's gentle nudge over Memorial Day brunch. Breathe life back in. Honey. He wouldn't want you mothballed. So he'd started small, framing a photo of them at P-Town. Arms slung casual around shoulders. Grins wide as the bay, donating Alex's crew jerseys to the team. Watching rookies row with that same fierce grace. And tonight, a date. Not a fix. Not a replacement. But a maybe, a coffee with Jordan? The barista from Diesel Cafe whose dimples deepened when he frothed lattes and whose laugh carried over the hiss of espresso. Jordan was easy company. 20. Art major at RISD commuting from Providence. With a mop of black curls tied back in a hasty bun and forearms roped from clay wheels. They met at the counter. Awkward at first, Christopher fidgeting with his phone. Jordan wiping flour from his apron like it was a shield. But over black coffee and scones that flaked like autumn leaves, the words flowed. Jordan talked passion projects, sculptures of queer saints. Saint Sebastian reimagined with circuit board arrows. Christopher shared center stories. The kid who'd come out to his trucker dad over Zoom and lived to hug it out. Sounds heroic, Jordan said. Eyes dark and intent over the rim of his mug. You make space for the mess. By closing time. The cafe's windows fogged with laughter. And Jordan's hand brushed Christopher's across the table, a spark. Tentative but warm. They walked the square under strings of Edison bulbs. Street musicians strumming Dylan covers. The air thick with fried dough from the funnel cake cart. "Wanna see my studio?" Jordan asked at the tea stop. Casual as if it weren't a leap. Christopher's pulse thrummed. Yes. And no. The ghost of Alex whispering caution. But he nodded. Boarding the Green Line south. The train rattling like a heartbeat. The studio was a converted garage in Pawtucket, Rhode Island's Rust Belt edge, where mill ghosts lingered in the brick. Inside, chaos reigned, half-formed figures in terracotta and bronze. Tools scattered like fallen stars. A turntable spinning Nina Simone low and soulful. Jordan poured cheap red from a jug. Their shoulders bumping as they toured the menagerie, a David with a rainbow sling. An Achilles cradling Patroclus's helmet. Art's my coming out, Jordan confessed. Leaning against a workbench dusted in clay. Parents in Lagos disowned me at 16. Flew here on a student visa. Built this from scraps. Christopher traced a finger over a bust, Jordan's own face. Fierce and fractured. Beautiful, he breathed. And meant the work. The man. The mirror to his own fractures. The kiss happened there. Amid the clay scent and Simone's velvetic, slow, exploratory. Jordan's hands cupping Christopher's jaw like it was porcelain. It tasted of wine and want. A thawing after winter's grip. They tumbled to a futon in the corner. Bodies mapping new territories. Gasps echoing off the rafters. It wasn't Alex, no golden curls. No rower's build, but it was alive. Consistent. A reminder that desire didn't die with the beloved. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled of earth and possibility, Jordan traced the scar on Christopher's collarbone from a childhood bike wreck. Stay, he murmured. Christopher did. Till dawn's light slanted through grimy panes. Birdsong a reveille. Back in Boston by noon. The high lingered like champagne bubbles, texts pinging from Jordan. Emojis of hearts and kills. Christopher dove into the week with renewed vigor, group sessions at the center where he shared, not just survived, his loss, a pitch for a youth mentorship program, drawing on Alex's activist fire. Ellen noticed over Tuesday tacos. her eyes crinkling like parchment. That glow. Kiddo, it's you again. Blush. Spilling about Jordan over cilantro-flecked rice. Slow, she advised. But her smile said go. Ever the stoic, grunted approval from his lazy boy, flipping channels to avoid the rom-com Ellen had cued. Just don't rush the bend, he said. Voice gruff with memory. But bends have switchbacks. And summer's idle twisted sharp. Jordan's visa loomed, F1 status teetering on graduation. Whispers of OPT extensions or H-1B lotteries that felt like Russian roulette. I could stay, he said one sticky August night. Sprawled on Christopher's fire escape. City lights twinkling like distant fires. T-chart? Maybe adjunct. Build here. Christopher's heart swelled, visions of shared mornings. Clay under nails and coffee steam mingling. We could, he replied. Lacing fingers. The future no longer a slope but a shared path. Then the call came. Shattering the haze, Stanford. Full ride for Jordan's MFA. Acceptance letter glowing on his phone like a siren. It's once in a lifetime, he said over falafel at the coop. Eyes darting to the hummus like it held escape routes. Christopher's fork paused midair. Falafel crumbling. And us. The words hung. Heavy as the humid air. Jordan reached across. Thumb stroking knuckles. Long distance. I've done it before. We hack it. But his voice wavered. And Christopher saw the fracture, the pull of dreams deferred once for family. Now tempting again. The arguments brewed slow. Then boiled, late-night texts turning terse. Weekends in Providence laced with subtext. You're choosing Clay over us, Christopher accused one September eve. Rain lashing the apartment windows like recriminations. Jordan fired back. Curls wild from frustrated raking. It's not choice, it's survival. You think I want to uproot again? For what? If it crumbles? The door slammed. Silence settling like fallout. Days blurred into radio static. Christopher burying in work. Jordan prepping portfolios in fevered isolation. Ellen sensed the storm. Inviting them for Columbus Day, now Indigenous Peoples' Day. She insisted. With a spread of fry bread from a North End vendor and stories of Wampanoag resilience. Awkward as new shoes. But the backyard fire pit worked its magic, sparks rising like confessions. Jordan opening up about Nigerian roots. The aunt who'd smuggled him books on Michelangelo's boys. Family's not blood, he said, echoing Christopher's own gospel. It's the ones who stay. By embers glow. They reconciled, kisses tentative, then fierce. Promises whispered of visits. Video calls. The long game. Yet doubt lingered. A shadow at the feast. Christopher confided in me over rake piles that weekend. Leaves mounded like unspoken fears. What if it's always this? Loving hard, then losing to the map. I paused, pitchfork in hand, the scent of damp earth grounding us. Son, expectations are maps we draw ourselves. Yours shattered once, remember? And look at you. Stronger, he nodded, but his eyes held the Atlantic's depth, vast. Unpredictable. Fall deepened. Jordan's departure a calendar countdown. They threw a send-off at the bistro, queer friends toasting with cosmos and quips. A playlist of road trip anthems blaring from speakers. Christopher drove him to Logan at dawn. The airport's fluorescent hum a counterpoint to their goodbye, hugs fierce. tears hot on cheeks. California's just a flight, Jordan murmured, boarding pass crinkling. Our story's not done. Christopher watched the gate swallow him, then drove home through rush hour snarl. Radio crooning Springsteen, born to run, but tethered still. The letters started weeks later, postcards from Palo Alto, sketches of redwoods and ramen joints, words scrawled in looping script, miss your laugh in the quiet. Christopher replied in kind, care packages of Dunkin' Munchkins and mixtapes. But the miles stretched. Midterms hit. Then Thanksgiving, Jordan stuck on the West Coast. Family drama pinning him. Next year, he promised. Christmas came solo, Christopher at our table, toasting Alex's memory with eggnog. Ellen's hand on his. You're enough, she said. He believed it. Almost. The Shatter revisited in February. Valentine's shadow long. A call at midnight, Jordan's voice, slurred with wine or worse. I met someone, he blurted. The words a gut punch over static. In ceramics lab. Real. Christopher's world tilted. The apartment spinning like a bad dream. Real? Like us wasn't. Silence. Then sobs. Tried. Good. I tried. But distance. It eats. Betrayal bloomed. Hot and thorny, not just the act, but the echo of Alex's end. Love's fragility laid bare again. He hung up, phone clattering to the floor, and ran out into Boston's biting wind. Streets slick with slush, lungs burning as he pounded the Freedom Trail. Past Paul Revere's house. The old north spire stabbing the sky. Tears freezing on lashes. Why am... Again? Why the pattern, adopted? But... Lost? Dawn found him on the common. Bench cold under him. Joggers blurring by like ghosts. Home brought Ellen's arms. Tom's quiet coffee. They listened through the night. No fixes. Just presence. Betrayal's a teacher, Ellen said, stroking his hair. Harsh. But it carves deeper capacity. Days bled to weeks, therapy ramped. Center groups a lifeline. Christopher wrote unsent letters to Jordan, burning them in the sink, forgiveness ashes, rage smoke. Spring thawed the ice. And with it, reinvention. A new volunteer, Fly? A soft-spoken librarian with wire rims and a penchant for Vonnegut, sparked nothing romantic, but friendship's steady flame. Christopher pitched his program, landed funding from a local foundation, naming it Bend Without Breaking. The launch was May. Under blooming cherries in the public garden, kids sharing stories, parents nodding through tears. He spoke last. Voice steady, loss shatters. But we choose the glue. That night, alone in the apartment, Jordan's things shipped back. Space reclaimed, he lit a candle for Alex, another for the boy he'd been. Expectations? Shattered. But in the pieces, a mosaic, family unbroken, self unapologetic, love not a peak but a practice. America, with its endless reinventions, had taught him that. The cherry blossoms had long since carpeted the swan boat's wake when Christopher stepped off the tee at Harvard Square. The air humming with buskers' fiddles and the scent of crepes from street carts. It was late June. His senior year a rearview blur of theses and triumphs. And tonight marked a pivot, a reading at the Harvard bookstore for his self-published chapbook. Bends in the River, poems born from Alex's echo. Jordan's fade, the foster scars that never fully healed. Ellen and Tom flanked him in the signing line. Her in a flowy sundress dotted with wildflowers. Him in khakis and a polo that strained at the belly. Both beaming like stage parents at a recital. The store was packed. Tufts alums, center kids with dog-eared copies, even Eli from the library, clutching a bouquet of peonies that blushed pink as dawn. Christopher's hands trembled on the podium, spotlights warm on his skin, but when he opened to the title piece, "We are not straights / but meanders," carving canyons / from stone-hearted banks, the room hushed, breaths sinking to his rhythm. He read of midnight drives with Alex, taillights bleeding red on blacktop, of Jordan's hands, clay slick and fleeting, of the kitchen confession, rain a baptism. Applause thundered at close, but it was Tom's nod from the front row, proud, unreserved, that anchored him, a quiet absolution for the years I'd fumbled words. Over pints at the friendly toast, greasy spoons and rainbow flags fluttering in the breeze, they debriefed. "You own that stage, son," Tom said. Clinking glasses, his lawyer's precision softened by ale. Ellen squeezed Christopher's knee under the booth. "It's not just words. It's you." Giving voice to the unspoken. Eli lingered, debating stanza breaks with a shy intensity that made Christopher's pulse skip, not fire, but ember. "Walk me to the square?" Eli asked later. And they did. Under gas lamps flickering like fireflies, Vonnegut quotes bouncing between them like shuttlecocks. Eli was a quiet revolution, 31 to Christopher's 22. With a laugh like gravel under tires and a habit of quoting statistics on queer-lit survival rates, Slaughterhouse 5 in a world of straights, he'd quip. No grand gestures. Just shared silences over library stacks. Coffee runs where he'd remember Christopher's order, Americano, 2 sugars, splash of oat. By July 4th, fireworks still echoing from the esplanade, they'd kissed in the stacks. Amid Dewey Decimals, books tumbling like dominoes. It was tentative, exploratory, no rush to claim territories. "I'm not looking for a savior," Eli murmured against his lips. Glasses fogging. "Just a reader," Christopher laughed. The sound light as confetti. "I've got pages." The summer unfolded lazy suite, Eli's Cambridge walk-up. A third-floor airy with bay windows overlooking the Charles. Became their haven. Mornings tangled in linen sheets. Sunlight slanting gold, afternoons at the center. Where Christopher's program thrived, mentorship pairs blooming like the rose gardens. Kids finding mirrors in each other's stories. Evenings. They'd cook, Eli's risotto creamy with arborio pilfered from the co-op. Christopher's salads tossed with farmers' market greens, debating everything from Foucault's Panopticon to the Sox's cursed streak. Sex was a revelation, slow, kind of. Eli's fingers tracing tattoos of memory. Christopher learning the map of scars on Eli's back from a bar fight in undergrad Ohio. Tom and Ellen embraced it gradual, like a fine wine uncorked. Eli joined Sunday suppers. His dry wit disarming Tom's grilling interrogations. "So, librarian, ever shelve a mystery you couldn't crack?" With tales of rare first editions smuggled from estate sales. Ellen bonded over book hauls, the two of them haunting Brattle Street's outdoor bins. Emerging with armfuls of dog-eared Auden and Baldwin. "He's steady," she confided to Christopher one harvest moon walk. Leaves crunching copper underfoot. "Like roots after the storm," Christopher nodded. Heart full, steady felt foreign. But welcome. A counterpoint to the tempest's past. Yet America's undercurrents run deep, and steady can capsize swift. Fall semester loomed, Christopher's master's apps to Leslie for education. Eli's grant for a queer archives project teetering on funding. Then the letter, a fellowship for Eli. 6 months in London, British Library's hidden manuscripts. A dream deferred since his Oxford crush in '09. It's research gold, he said over stir-fry in the airy. Chopsticks pausing midair. Christopher's fork scraped ceramic. The sizzle of peppers suddenly loud. 6 months? Now. Eli's eyes, brown and bespectacled, softened. Video calls. Holidays. We've got the blueprint. But blueprints crack under pressure. The arguments simmered, Christopher accusing Eli of flight patterns. Eli countering with, growth isn't stasis. You think I'm holding you back? Christopher snapped one October night. Wind whipping the bay window like accusations. Eli paced, glasses slipping down his nose. No, I'm scared. Building, then burning. Like you with Jordan. The name drop landed like a slap. Old wounds reopening. Christopher stormed out, pounding pavement to the river, where rowers sliced water like knives through doubt. Reconciliation came ragged, Eli at the door at 3 a.m. Rain-soaked and contrite, murmuring apologies into Christopher's collar. I love you, he said. First time voiced. The words a bridge over the chasm. Christopher pulled him in, bodies colliding soft, making up in the downpour of sheets. But the fellowship hung, a sword of Damocles. Eli deferred, for us, he insisted, emailing regrets to the panel. Christopher exhaled. But the what-ifs lingered. A low hum. Winter wrapped them cozy, holiday lights strung across the airy. Tom's famous wassels spiked with rye. Ellen's gift of monogrammed mugs, E&C, intertwined. New Year's. They toasted on the fire escape. Champagne flutes clinking under stars smudged by city haze. To Ben's, Eli said, kissing him deep. The future no longer foe but fellow traveler. Spring brought bloom, Christopher's acceptance to Leslie. Eli's grant renewed local. The center's gala, black tie under a tent in the common. Fairy lights twinkling like approval, marked milestone. Christopher emceed. Voice carrying tales of men's triumphs, the trans girl who'd lettered in wrestling. The bi kid reconciling faith and flags. Eli watched from the wings, pride etching his face like fine lines on vellum. But joy's shadow is vigilance. And it struck Memorial Day weekend, the air thick with grill smoke and memory. A call from the center, one of Christopher's ments. 17-year-old Theo. Outed by a Snapchat leak. Family fracturing in the fallout. He won't talk, the director said. Voice tight. Christopher drove to Dorchester. Heart hammering. Finding Theo on a stoop. Hoodie pulled low. Eyes red-rimmed. They said it's a phase, the boy whispered. Voice cracking. But what if it's me they hate? Christopher sat beside him. The concrete warm as confession. It's not you. It's their fear. He shared his own, the rain-soaked kitchen. Their vigil. Jordan's fade. Love shatters expectations. Theo. But it rebuilds stronger. Theo leaned in. Sobs muffled in shoulder. And in that moment, Christopher saw the cycle break, his pain alchemized to purpose. Back home, Eli waited with takeout foe. Steam curling like incense. Hero, he teased. But his eyes held reverence. They ate on the floor. Legs tangled. Talking Theo's path, therapy referrals, ally workshops. You're changing the map, Eli said. Head on Christopher's lap. One story at a time. Summer solstice found them road-tripping the Cape, convertible top-down. Wind tousling curls and worries. Beaches at Nauset. Dunes whispering secrets. Lobster shacks with buoys swinging lazy. One sunset. Toes in surf. Eli dropped to knee, not ring. But a conch shell. Etched inside, our bend. Not forever yet, he said. Voice sea-salted. But this. Christopher pulled him up. Kissing fierce against the tide's roar. This. All of it. Expectations? Long shattered. Remade in salt and story. Christopher? Once the adopted whisper. Loving. Unbreakable. The conch shell sat on the mantel of their new place, a one-bedroom in Inman Square. Cambridge's pulse with its co-ops and coffee roasters, a talisman against the ordinary. It was August. Christopher's first semester at Leslie, a whirlwind of pedagogy seminars and practicums. Eli curating a pop-up exhibit at the Cambridge Public Library, queer codices, manuscripts of hidden loves from Hawthorne's notebooks to Baldwin's margins. Their mornings synced to the alarm's trill, Eli brewing pour-over in a Chemex. Christopher journaling lesson plans amid toast crumbs. Kisses stolen over the sink like punctuation. Life had settled into a rhythm. Not metronomic but jazz, improvised. Syncopated. Weekends at the center evolved. Christopher's program now a non-profit arm. Bend forward. With chapters budding in Lowell and Worcester. He'd facilitate circles under string lights in community centers. Voices young and old weaving tapestries of triumph and tremor. One evening, the dad, blue collar, calloused hands, stood halting, "My boy's like you." Scared me at first. But seeing him here makes me want to be better. Applause rippled. Christopher's throat tight. Later, over beers at the Bon, the man clapped his back. Thanks for the map, kid. Eli wove in seamless, guest lectures on archival erasures. His dry humor disarming teens, history's a closet we all pick locks for. Their nights were sanctuary, Eli reading aloud from dog-eared paperbacks. Christopher's head pillowed on thigh. The world shrinking to lamplight and love. Sex deepened, exploratory still, but rooted. Bodies knowing each other's cadences like a favorite sonnet. "You're home," Christopher murmured once. Post-climax glow. Tracing Eli's jaw. Eli smiled. "Glasses askew. And you're the address." Tom and Ellen visited often. Their Victorian hours drive but worlds away in warmth. Fall foliage tours became ritual, winding the Mohawk Trail. Leaves aflame in gules and/or Ellen packing thermoses of chowder. Tom regaling with Prohibition bootlegger lore. Over cider at a roadside orchard. Tom pulled Christopher aside. Apples crisp in the air. "Proud of you, son." Not just surviving, thriving. His voice graveled. Eyes misting, Christopher hugged him fierce. The boy in him mending. Ever the seer. Gifted Eli a family recipe book, Hail Heirlooms. Scribbled in her mother's hand. "Roots for your branches," she said. Winking. But America's melody has minor keys. And winter's chill brought discord. Bend forward caught eyes. A grant from the Mass Cultural Council. But strings attached, expansion to Springfield. Christopher relocating 3 days a week for pilot programs. It's growth, He argued over glühwein at the German Christmas market. Lights twinkling on spruce boughs. Eli's face shadowed under the tent. And us? Another bend. The words echoed old fractures, Jordan's flight, Alex's drive. They tabled it, but tension hummed. A low E string plucked off key. The holidays amplified. Christmas at home. Tom's tree groaning with ornaments, Christopher's lopsided clay handprint from kindergarten. Alex's stocking repurposed for donations. New Year's Eve. They hosted, friends crammed in the square walk-up. Champagne corks popping like gunfire. Resolutions scrawled on napkins. More courage. Less caution. Eli's toast cut deep. To stories unfinished, may we write them bold. Kisses at midnight? Confetti in curls. But dawn brought the grant deadline. Christopher's laptop glowing accusatory. January fractured it open. Acceptance letter. Springfield start date in March. Eli withdrew. Go. Build. But his smile strained. Silences stretching like taffy. Arguments escalated. You're running the pattern, Christopher accused. Packing demo materials in the living room. Boxes mocking domesticity. Eli fired back from the kitchenette. Mug cracking in sink. And you're chasing maps that leave me pinned. The door slammed, Eli to the library stacks. Christopher to the river. Ice flows grinding like teeth. Reconciliation faltered, space became strategy. Eli crashed at Eli's, irony not lost, while Christopher sublet a crash pad in Springfield. The Pioneer Valley's hills a cold comfort. Texts dwindled to logistics, rent split, exhibit opening? The center thrived, Springfield kids hungry for mirrors. Sessions packed with hijab-clad queers and farm boy allies, but solitude gnawed. One April night. Post circle. A mentee's story gutted him, disowned at 16. Couch surfing till a shelter saved her. Don't let love's bend break you, she said. Eyes fierce. Christopher nodded, but his own bend buckled. The shatter peaked in May. Derby Day, Ellen and Tom's invite to Churchill Downs. A whim trip to Kentucky for mint juleps and horseflesh thunder. Christopher flew solo. Eli demurring with work. The track was chaos, fedoras and finery. The roar as Secretariat's ghost charged the wire. But amid the bets and bourbon, Tom's words over railside oysters pierced, son. Love's not a program to scale. It's the daily commute. Ellen nodded, her hand cool on his. Call him. Before the wire. Back in Boston, rain-slicked runways mirroring turmoil, Christopher did. Eli at the door. Unshaven. Shelves behind him a testament to undone work. I bent too far, Christopher started. Voice rain thick. Chased the shatter instead of us. Eli pulled him in. Door clicking shut. Words tumbling, fears of loss. Patterns of flight. The ache of absence. I love you, Eli repeated. Mantra now. But steady means staying. Not scaling alone. They talked till dawn, compromises sketched, hybrid model for Bend. Springfield weekends only. Eli tagging for pop-ups. Summer healed, joint therapy. A dyke counselor's office smelling of sage and empathy. Unpacking closets within closets. They road-tripped again, this time Acadia. Granite cliffs and lobster halls. Tides carving lessons in stone. One fog-shrouded morn. Hiking Cadillac Mountain. Eli stopped at the summit. Pack unzipped to reveal not conch, but rings, simple tungsten. Etched with rivers. Marry me? He asked. knee not bent but heart open. Christopher laughed through tears, fog lifting like grace. Just all our bends. The wedding was September. Autumn's palette their canopy, a backyard affair at the Victorian. Leaves confetti gold. Bend kids as ring-bearers. Tom officiating with vows cribbed from Whitman. These I singing in spring, he read. Steady. Ellen dabbing eyes beside. Eli and Christopher exchanged rings under the oak. Promises whispered, through shatters. We meant. The reception spilled to the porch, fiddle tunes and fireflies. Toasts toasting resilience. Alex's memory a candle flickered bright. Years folded forward, bend forward national. Chapters from Seattle to Savannah, Eli's tenure at Harvard's archives. Tenured tales of queer persistence. They adopted a 4-year-old from Philly's system. Echoes closing circles, naming him River. For the bends that carried them. Tom and Ellen doted. Grandparents in cardigans and chaos. The family portrait rewritten. Expectations shattered? Utterly. But in the gleam of shards, a life luminous, human, tough, unapologetically theirs. In America's grand, flawed narrative, they wrote the after, not end, but ever-unfolding page.